My name is Mara Wren. I was 37 years old when my older sister stood in the doorway of her white kitchen, held her son against her hip, and told me I needed to stop acting unstable if I wanted to keep seeing the child I had carried for her. She said it while the kettle was hissing, while a bowl of cut strawberries was sweating on the counter, and while the little boy I had felt under my ribs for 38 weeks reached one hand toward me and said my name in the small, warm voice that had once made every hard thing feel survivable. I did not answer her. That was not because I had nothing to say. It was because I already knew something she had forgotten. 3 years earlier, in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant, paper wristbands, and overbrewed coffee, I had signed a stack of birth documents for the child my sister and her husband wanted more than anything in the world. But I had not signed away everything, and the reason I stayed quiet in her kitchen that afternoon was simple. People like my sister only get careless when they think the story already belongs to them. My sister's name was Naomi Bell. She was 41 then, polished in the way some women are polished by long practice. Her hair was always done before mine. Her lipstick stayed where it belonged. Her voice could turn soft in front of strangers and sharp the moment the door closed. She had always been good at arranging surfaces so that other people would mistake them for character. Growing up, Naomi had been the kind of older sister who never asked for help in a way that sounded like asking. She simply moved through life as though everyone else had been assigned to support whatever she wanted next. When we were children, she would hand me her wet towel and tell me to hang it up because I was better at neat things. When we were teenagers, she would leave dirty mugs in the den and say she had a headache, and somehow I would be the one rinsing lipstick off the rim. When she got engaged in her late 20s, I spent 3 weekends folding invitations and driving across town for ribbon because she said I had better taste and steadier hands. When her florist canceled 2 days before the wedding, I was the one up after midnight trimming stems at our mother's dining table while Naomi slept. None of that was dramatic on its own. That was the problem. A life can be built out of small unfairnesses so ordinary that no one notices you are being trained to disappear. Our mother noticed, of course. She simply liked the arrangement. Naomi has always been more delicate, she would say, as if delicacy were a tax the rest of us had to pay forever. Our father was not cruel. He was worse in a quieter way. He hated friction, and people who hate friction often side with whoever speaks first and loudest. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who picked people up from the mechanic, signed for deliveries, remembered birthdays, watered porch plants during holidays, and showed up with soup when somebody had the flu. By my 30s, I worked as a neonatal nurse in Columbus, Ohio, and my life had taken on the shape of useful things: early shifts, sensible shoes, grocery lists on the counter, 1-bedroom condo with a narrow balcony, blue mug with a chipped handle that I still kept because it had belonged to my grandmother. I did not have children. That fact sat in the family like a blank. They all thought they understood. Some people assumed it was a tragedy. Some assumed it was a freedom. Naomi treated it as availability. She and her husband Daniel had been trying for years by the time she first came to me with the idea. We were sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in February. Snowmelt was dripping from the railing outside. I had made tomato soup and grilled cheese because she said she had not been eating well. She took 3 bites, set the sandwich down, and began to cry. Naomi cried beautifully. Her tears never made her blotchy. They made her look expensive and wronged. "I can't do another cycle," she said. "I can't do another doctor who acts hopeful and then gives me that face." Daniel sat beside her with his hands clasped, staring at the steam from his bowl as though the proper husbandly expression might be hiding in it. I reached for a napkin before she asked. Of course I did. What came after took months, not one dramatic conversation. That matters. Big family betrayals do not always begin in one sharp moment. Sometimes they are assembled slowly from love, guilt, habit, and the oldest role you have ever played. At first, Naomi only asked if I would come to appointments with her. Then she asked if I would meet the fertility attorney, just so we understand our options. Then she asked if I would think about helping them in a bigger way. She never said the ugliest part out loud. She never said, "You are the one person in this family who can be relied on to break yourself without making me feel bad about it." She didn't need to, I understood. The doctors explained it all in calm voices and laminated folders. Naomi could not safely carry a pregnancy. There were other options, of course, but what Naomi wanted was something cleaner inside her own mind. She wanted the child to be made inside the family, carried inside the family, held inside the family from the first minute forward. She said it with her hand pressed over mine in the clinic parking lot, cheeks pink from cold, as if this were about sacred trust and not control. I wish I could say I agreed only because I was pressured. That would make me sound wiser than I was. The truth is that I loved her. Not in the easy way, in the old way. In the way formed by years of cleaning up behind someone and mistaking usefulness for closeness. I also loved the version of her that existed only in rare flashes. The one who used to squeeze my shoulder after a bad day in high school. The one who once sat on my bed when I was 19 and told me I was the strongest person she knew. Those scraps had fed me for years, and I wanted there to be one thing in our family that was done cleanly, generously, without scorekeeping. So I said yes. The child was conceived with my egg and donor sperm, chosen jointly through the clinic. That was the arrangement Naomi wanted, because Daniel's fertility had also become part of their grief, and she preferred the fiction of a beginning that belonged only to the women in the family. A lawyer put the terms into plain language and then formal language. Naomi and Daniel would be the legal parents. There would be an adoption finalization after birth. There would also be a separate post-adoption contact agreement, because everyone acknowledged that I was not a stranger stepping out of the picture. I was the birth mother, the biological mother, and Naomi's sister. The agreement covered regular contact, truthful disclosure to the child at an age-appropriate time, access to certain medical history records, and mediation before any attempt to cut off contact except in cases of real danger. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Oakes with silver hair and rimless glasses, slid the papers toward us one by one. "Read every page," she said. Naomi laughed and said, "Mara is the one who reads every page. That's her whole personality." Everyone chuckled. I read every page anyway. That was the first hidden card, though none of them knew it then. The second came later in the hospital. The third came from the one thing Naomi always underestimated in me, which was that I did not only endure, I remembered. The pregnancy itself was harder than I had admitted it would be. Not tragic, not dangerous, just long, physical, and intimate in the way that makes promises matter more. The little routines took root in me before I could stop them. The sliced apple I ate on my break at 11. The way I pressed my palm low on my stomach when I drove over railroad tracks. The music I played softly when I folded laundry on Thursdays. By 24 weeks, the baby kicked whenever I leaned back in my favorite chair. By 30 weeks, he settled when I spoke. Naomi came to enough appointments to stay central. Daniel came to enough to seem involved, but most of the lived hours belonged to me. The sore back, the midnight thirst, the ultrasound photos tucked into the drawer beside my bed, the tiny striped sleeper Naomi bought and left at my condo because she said it made things feel real. Some nights she would call and ask, "Has he been active today?" I always answered. By the end, I had stopped saying the baby and started saying him without noticing. Our mother loved that part. She would pat my arm and say, "That's natural, but remember whose son he will be. Remember whose son he will be." As if love could be tidied into ownership by getting the grammar right early enough. He was born on a wet Thursday morning in October after 14 hours of labor and a long gray dawn that never seemed to brighten. Naomi stood near my left shoulder with both hands pressed over her mouth the moment he cried. Daniel cried openly. I cried too, from pain and relief and a kind of shock that lives outside language. They placed him on my chest first because that was how the delivery had gone, and because hospital procedure follows bodies before it follows family narratives. He was warm and slippery and indignant. His hair was darker than I expected. He had Naomi's chin somehow, though that made no biological sense, and everyone said it anyway, because families like resemblance even when they have to invent it. His fingers opened against my skin. That is one of the cruelest things about certain choices. You can make them with full intention and still be undone by the ordinary reality of a hand, a smell, a weight, a small sound against your collarbone. Naomi named him Eli, not Elias, not Elijah, just Eli. For 2 days, the room filled with flowers, balloons, phone chargers, paper cups, and relatives who wanted to congratulate Naomi as if she had crossed the ocean in her own body. I did not resent that. Not then. I had agreed to the shape of things. What I noticed instead were smaller things. The nurse asking me if I wanted extra copies of the consent and discharge packet because family surrogacy cases often became messy later. Yes, I said. Patricia Oakes stopping by because she handled final signatures in person whenever possible. Keep the full packet, she told me quietly while Naomi was in the hall with Daniel. Not just the ceremonial pages, all of it. I kept it. That was the second hidden card. The packet was thick, cream-colored, fastened with a red hospital clip. Consent forms, temporary medical authorizations, acknowledgments, post-adoption contact schedule, emergency disclosure provisions tied to genetic history, mediation requirements, signature pages with dates and witness stamps. I took the whole thing home in the side pocket of my tote bag, along with my discharge instructions, one tiny knit cap the nurse said they had extras of, and the plastic hospital bracelet I could not bring myself to throw away. The first 6 months after Eli was born were strange but not yet ugly. I was there constantly. Naomi invited it at first. She was tired. Daniel traveled for work. The baby had reflux. Their white farmhouse sink always had bottles drying on clean towels. Their couch smelled like lavender spray and old takeout containers. I rocked Eli through long evenings while Naomi showered or slept. I came by before shifts and after shifts. I learned the sound of his angry cry, his tired cry, his hiccupy about to sleep cry. When he was 3 months old, he would stop fussing if I walked him through the front hall and tapped the frame of the window with my knuckle twice. When he was 5 months old, he liked the blue corner of the muslin blanket and would rub it against his cheek until his eyelids fell. Those are not dramatic details either. They are simply the details that make theft feel holy and ugly at the same time. Because once you know which shoulder a child falls asleep on, being told to stand back is not a small thing. The changes began slowly enough that if you only looked at 1 week at a time, you could call them nothing. Naomi started correcting the way I held him in front of other people, even when I was doing nothing differently. She stopped using my name when talking to him and started saying, "Wave to Auntie," in a bright artificial tone that landed like a fence post every single time. At his first Christmas photo session, she handed me the diaper bag and said, "Can you stay behind the camera? I want it to look simple." Simple meant clean. Simple meant unmessy. Simple meant that the woman who had carried him would not be visible in the image that would go on everyone's fridge. By the time Eli turned 1, Naomi had developed a whole language for erasing me without sounding cruel to anyone who had not earned the right to hear the cruelty clearly. Let's keep routines consistent. He gets confused easily. You know how sensitive he is. I just think boundaries are healthier now. But boundaries only ever moved in one direction. If her sitter canceled, I was close enough to call. If Daniel was out of town and Eli had an ear infection, I was trustworthy enough to spend the night in the guest room. If Naomi wanted 3 uninterrupted hours for a charity luncheon, I was family enough to be the one who could calm him after his nap. Yet when I asked to take him to the zoo on a Saturday or have him at my condo for an afternoon, there was always a reason it would be too disruptive. Once, when Eli was 18 months old, he saw me at their front door and ran so hard across the hardwood that he slid in his socks and laughed. He lifted both arms from me without hesitation. Naomi's face changed. It was a fast thing, not dramatic, just one expression sliding underneath another. That was the first time I realized she did not simply want to be his mother. She wanted to be the only uncontested center in the room. After that, the pattern hardened. There were 3 canceled weekends in 1 month, then 6 in 3 months. Then I noticed that every time I asked for makeup time, Naomi would answer politely in text and then stop responding just before anything became specific. Later, she would send me photos of Eli at pumpkin patches, library story time, Sunday brunch, all the family outings I was apparently too confusing to join. When I brought it up in person, she would lower her voice and say things like, "Please don't do this in front of him," as if I were the one creating instability by naming it. I began keeping notes then, not because I planned revenge, because I needed proof that I was not losing my own mind. Date, time, canceled visit, reason given, whether makeup time was offered, whether I had been asked to babysit within the same week. The notes lived first in the back of a grocery receipt folded into my wallet, then in a ruled notebook, and eventually in a spreadsheet on my laptop, because numbers calm me when people do not. Over 18 months, Naomi canceled 23 scheduled visits and asked me for emergency childcare 31 times. That ratio was a whole personality in numbers. The second escalation came through our mother. I should have expected that. Our family has never believed in direct cruelty when triangulation is available. One Sunday after church, Mom carried 2 lemon bars to the fellowship hall table where I was sitting and arranged her mouth into concern. "Naomi is worried about you," she said. I had just come off 3 night shifts. My eyes burned. The vinyl chair stuck slightly to the back of my legs. Somewhere behind us, someone was rinsing coffee urns in the church kitchen. "About what?" "She says, you've seemed emotional lately." Anyone who has been translated inside a family knows the violence hidden in that tone. Not openly accusing, just gently filing a new version of you into other people's heads. "I'm frustrated," I said. "That's different." Mom sighed and cut into her lemon bar with the plastic fork, as if my correction were childish. "Well, when women go through these kinds of arrangements, lines can blur. These kinds of arrangements. As though the years of paperwork, consultations, signed terms, and repeated assurances could be reduced to something shameful and vague the moment Naomi wanted sympathy. I remember staring at the powdered sugar scattered over the table and thinking, she's already started. That afternoon, I went home and opened the fireproof box in my hall closet. Inside were my passport, condo papers, grandmother's ring, Eli's hospital bracelet, and the cream-colored packet with the red clip. I read every page again. That was when I found the language that would later save me. Any substantial change to contact had to go through mediation first, except in cases of documented, immediate danger. The agreement had been filed, not merely signed in private. There were also attached acknowledgments regarding truthful identity disclosure and access provisions connected to Eli's genetic history. Naomi had built her fantasy on a very common mistake. She believed that because she liked the emotional story better than the legal one would eventually give way. It did not. Still, I did nothing dramatic. That mattered. I did not pound on her door. I did not post online. I did not send wild texts in the night. I did what I had always done when the ground moved under me. I became quieter, more exact, more observant. At work, I was still reliable. At home, I began seeing a counselor once every other Thursday because the grief had become too shapeless to carry alone. Her office had a green lamp, a box of tissues nobody wanted to touch first, and one uneven bookshelf, with parenting books mixed in among trauma workbooks and crossword puzzle collections. Her name was Dr. Tessa Monroe. She listened without dramatizing anything, which made me trust her. "You are not confused about reality," she told me in our 4th session. "You are being trained to doubt your own reading of repeated behavior." I cried in my car afterward with both hands on the steering wheel and the radio off. That was not instability. It was what happens when someone finally describes the weather you have been standing in. Naomi found out I was in counseling because our mother saw the appointment reminder card in my bag when we met for lunch. I realized too late that I had left the pocket unzipped when I paid. After that, something in Naomi sharpened. That is the thing about selfish people. Give them one real detail, and they will use it as a ladder to reach conclusions they already wanted. She began sending me texts that looked calm on the surface and were built to produce reaction. Eli is having a hard week. Please don't put pressure on him. I think your energy has felt intense lately. I really hope you are getting the support you need. If I answered too fast, I looked emotional. If I answered too slowly, I looked distant. If I asked for clarity, she would say, "Why are you making this bigger?" By then, Eli was old enough to remember patterns. He called me Aunt Mara because that was the chosen name everyone had settled on. He also knew my condo had the fishmobile above the guest bed and the drawer with the wooden trains. He knew I cut pancakes into moons. He knew that when thunder bothered him, I let him press his hand flat against my chest and count breaths with me. Those routines were not accidental. They were a relationship. And Naomi hated visible proof of that relationship more than she hated anything else I had ever done. The third escalation came at preschool enrollment. I found out by accident. Naomi had asked if I could come over on a Tuesday evening because she and Daniel were attending a fundraising dinner and their sitter had canceled again. I arrived with leftover baked ziti in a glass dish because Eli loved the crispy corners. His shoes were by the bench. One tiny raincoat hung low on a hook. Everything looked ordinary. While Eli sat at the kitchen table drawing lopsided blue circles that were apparently planets, Naomi rushed down the hall with one earring on and said, "If the school calls, ignore it." I forgot to update one emergency form. I looked up. What school? The preschool for fall. Why would they call me? She was pulling lipstick from her handbag when she answered. They won't now. It's fine. She saw my face then and did that quick, cold calculation I had started recognizing. Too late. Too much said. Backfill now. I just needed to clean up some paperwork, she added. After they left, I found the enrollment folder open on the counter under a stack of mail because Naomi had been rushing and had not bothered to fully hide it. I should probably tell you that I am not proud of reading what was there, but pride is a luxury for people who are not being erased in their own name. On the emergency contacts page, my name had been crossed out. On a separate internal note clipped behind it, in a different section meant for custody or safety concerns, there was a sentence that made my stomach turn so fast I had to grip the counter. Birth relative may present emotionally. Do not release child. Contact mother only. Birth relative may present emotionally. Not dangerous. Not violent. Not intoxicated. Not any real thing. Just emotionally. Vague enough to stain. Mild enough to sound reasonable. Cruel enough to function. I took photos with my phone and put the folder back exactly as I had found it. That night, after Eli fell asleep with one sock half off and his palm open against the dinosaur sheet, I sat at Naomi's kitchen table under the pendant light and realized the whole shape of it. She was building a record. Not a true one, a usable one. A mother can make almost any lie sound protective if she speaks softly enough. That was the moment the story changed. Until then, I had still been hoping she would wake up one morning ashamed and stop. After that, I stopped hoping and started preparing. Before we continue, I want to say this. Hidden Revenge Stories channel shares stories of people who take back control of their lives. If this story speaks to you, leave your thoughts below and tell me where you are listening to this story from. Do you have siblings too? What kind of people are they? The first person I called was Patricia Oakes. Her office still smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The blinds were half closed against bright spring sun. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the pattern, the canceled visits, the church comments, the counseling being turned into gossip, the preschool note, the emergency child care requests that proved Naomi trusted me whenever convenience outweighed image. When I finished, Patricia folded her hands and asked one question. Have you done anything she can document honestly as a threat? No. Good, she said. Then let's not give her anything she can distort. That sentence became my discipline for the next 4 months. Patricia explained the problem plainly. Post-adoption contact agreements are only as strong as the person willing to enforce them. Many birth relatives cannot afford to push back. Many are too ashamed. Many fear being painted exactly the way Naomi was trying to paint me. But my agreement had been filed properly. The mediation language mattered. The school note mattered. The false safety implication mattered. Most of all, the pattern mattered. If she is trying to build a record, Patricia said, we build the real one. So we did, not loudly. Accurately. I printed the text history and highlighted every canceled visit, every request for unpaid childcare, every line where Naomi described me as safe when she needed a favor and unstable when I asked for contact. I retrieved visitor logs from the preschool after Patricia sent a records request on my behalf. On one form, Naomi had checked a box indicating, quote, family conflict, but left the required incident description blank. I obtained my counseling attendance confirmation from Dr. Monroe, not the content of sessions, but proof of voluntary, consistent care and the absence of any emergency intervention or safety concern. I pulled my work evaluations, which showed stable employment, commendations, and a spotless record. I saved church roster dates, showing I had continued showing up, continued serving, continued being ordinary in public, while Naomi quietly narrated me as something else. The hope person in all of this came from a place I had not expected. Her name was Elena Ruiz, and she was Eli's preschool teacher that fall. We first met by accident at a public library story hour in June. Naomi had canceled another Saturday visit that morning because Eli was overstimulated, and I had gone to return books just to keep from sitting in my condo thinking myself sick. Then I heard a laugh I knew. Eli was near the rug with a paper frog on one knee. He saw me and ran over before Naomi could stop him. "Aunt Mara," he said, wrapping himself around my legs. Naomi's face went rigid. Elena noticed everything in one glance. Good teachers do. She came over smiling in that warm, practical way some women have, and said, "So you're Aunt Mara. Eli talks about your moon pancakes." It was such a small sentence, but it cut straight through months of Naomi's private rewriting. Someone outside the family had seen that I was real in his daily language. Naomi recovered quickly and said, "We're working on some boundaries." Elena did not change expression. "Children do best with clear, truthful relationships," she said. "He seems very happy to see you." That was all. But afterward, when Naomi steered Eli away and left early, Elena slipped a folded library flyer into my hand. On the back she had written, "If you ever need visitor sign-in confirmation or copies of what the school has on file, ask through proper channels. Keep everything. Hope sometimes looks like a person refusing to be trained by someone else's version first." The next escalation came from Naomi's own greed and panic. Eli turned 4 that autumn. He was old enough now to ask questions that could not be put off forever. Why did he have baby pictures with me in the hospital bed? Why did Aunt Mara have a bracelet with his birthday on it? Why did Nana once say he had grown under Aunt Mara's heart? Naomi handled those moments badly because she believes control is the same as timing. She kept pushing the truth further ahead, but children tug at loose fabric. One answer leads to another. One inconsistency opens a whole hallway. By winter, Eli had started saying things like, "Mommy says you borrowed me when I was a baby. Is that true?" Borrowed me. I went home after that and stood in my kitchen with my coat still on, staring at the magnet calendar on the fridge until the dates blurred. That night, I added a new sheet to the spreadsheet. Identity statements made to child. Date. Exact words. Context. Witness if any. Patricia filed for mediation in January. Naomi ignored it for 2 weeks, then sent back a response through her own attorney, claiming she had, quote, "reasonable concerns about emotional boundary confusion." That phrase told me exactly what had happened. She had found a lawyer willing to polish the lie, rather than build a new one. The mediation session took place in a county family services building with beige walls, humming lights, and one fake fern in the corner coated with dust. Naomi arrived in a camel coat with Daniel beside her and our mother behind them, as if she needed an audience for my alleged instability. I wore navy slacks, a cream sweater, and the small silver necklace my grandmother used to twist when she was thinking. Patricia sat on my left. Across from us, Naomi kept one hand on her legal pad and did not look at me. The mediator was a quiet man named Stephen Klein, who asked simple questions in a voice so neutral it forced the rest of us to sound either credible or ridiculous by contrast. Naomi opened with what I had expected: concern, confusion, a wish for peace, the claim that Eli became dysregulated after visits, the suggestion that I was having difficulty accepting roles. I listened to her say all that while I remembered her calling me at 6:12 a.m. 1 month earlier because Eli had a fever and Daniel was out of town, and she didn't know anyone else he calmed for this way. When it was my turn, I did not argue with adjectives. I gave dates, I gave logs, I gave the count of canceled visits beside the count of childcare requests. I provided the preschool safety note and the blank incident description. I provided the filed agreement requiring mediation before contact restrictions. Naomi kept her face composed until Stephen Klein asked, "Mrs. Bell, if Ms. Wren was safe enough for 31 emergency child care requests, why was she marked as a release concern at school without an accompanying incident?" That was the first hairline crack. Naomi answered too quickly. Those situations were private and controlled. Stephen wrote something down. Private and controlled, meaning I was safe only when hidden and useful. The mediation did not resolve matters because Naomi would not yield. But it gave us something better. It gave us a clean record of her position. 2 weeks later, she escalated again. She filed in family court for restricted contact. Her affidavit described me as fixated, emotionally volatile, and unable to respect parental boundaries. She included screenshots of texts stripped of context, our mother's written statement about my intensity, and a typed incident log listing moments that, when read plainly, amounted to me crying once in a driveway after being denied a birthday visit and asking twice for clarity about a holiday schedule. I read the filing at Patricia's office under a brass lamp that made the paper look warmer than it was. You never really forget the feeling of seeing yourself translated by someone who benefits from making you smaller and less credible. It is like being skinned by office language. Patricia slid a box of tissues toward me. I did not take one. She overreached, she said. How? She made it formal. That was the third hidden card fully coming into view. Families thrive on murk. Systems, imperfect as they are, at least require timestamps. Once Naomi made her lie official, she had to pin it to actual dates, actual forms, actual categories. That is where controlling people often fail. They are excellent at atmosphere. They are not always excellent at consistency. So we answered formally. Patricia filed my response with exhibits: the full contact agreement, the hospital consent packet, the mediation record, work records, counseling attendance letter, school record request showing Naomi had designated me both trusted caregiver and safety concern within overlapping periods. A timeline demonstrating that the messages Naomi called obsessive were almost all sent within hours of her own invitations, cancellations, or requests that I step in. We also requested the school records directly from the district system, not only the paper folder in Naomi's kitchen. And that is where her own structure started turning on her. There were two versions of the concern notation. One entered at the school level. Another, more formal one, submitted through the district parent portal later, attempting to classify me under a category requiring documentation. She had uploaded none. No police report, no medical incident, no court order, no witness statement from anyone outside the family. Just language, just mood, just the hope that unstable would do the work all by itself. The hearing was set for April. Those 6 weeks before it were the tightest part of the whole story, because structure does not feel powerful while you are waiting inside it. It feels slow, vulnerable, exposed. Naomi knew there was a hearing coming, and people like her get cruelest when the deadline is close enough to taste. She stopped letting me see Eli entirely. She sent one message saying all communication should go through counsel. Our mother called twice to say I was embarrassing everyone. Daniel, who had floated through years of this with the moral backbone of steamed rice, finally sent me a text of his own. Maybe if you just step back for a while, this can calm down. I stared at that message at 11:43 p.m. in my dark living room while the refrigerator motor hummed and rain clicked against the balcony door. Step back from what? From the child I had grown inside my own body, from the relationship he knew in his bones, from the agreement they had begged me to sign because they needed me then. But I did step back, outwardly. I sent nothing reckless. I did not break. I worked. I documented. I met with Patricia. I saw Dr. Monroe. I slept badly, but I still got up. Some evenings I sat at my kitchen table with the fireproof box open beside me and held the hospital bracelet in one hand, not because objects solve anything, but because they keep memory from being rewritten too easily. The red clip from the original packet had bent slightly at one end. Eli's tiny printed surname from the hospital still had mine attached to it in the earliest line of paperwork, before the later parentage pages took effect. Facts have a smell to them when they sit on paper long enough. Dust, ink, time. The week before the hearing, one more thing happened. Elena Ruiz contacted Patricia. She had been subpoenaed for records because Naomi's attorney had identified the preschool as a source of concern. Elena, unlike most people, had actually read the record request before handing it off. She had also kept notes, routine educator notes, not dramatic, not emotional, just the sort of observations good teachers write, because patterns matter. Eli becomes distressed when told certain family members are not allowed. Child speaks positively and consistently of Aunt Mara. No direct incident involving Aunt Mara observed on school grounds. Parent concern references emotional confusion, but no behavior report attached. Elena also noted one statement from Naomi during a pickup conversation. "We're trying to phase my sister out gently. Phase my sister out gently." Even on paper, it sounded like what it was. A plan, not a safety response. That note became the hinge. The hearing took place on a gray Wednesday morning in Franklin County Family Court. The building was cold in the way public buildings often are, as if heat were something granted conditionally. The floors had been waxed recently. The metal detector trays clacked. A vending machine near the second-floor waiting area made a low electrical buzz and sold stale crackers nobody wanted until they had been there for 4 hours. Naomi arrived in cream wool and pearl studs. Our mother wore navy and a martyr's expression. Daniel carried a leather portfolio and looked exactly like a man hoping paperwork might let him avoid having a soul in public. I was there before all of them with Patricia, 2 binders, 1 accordion folder, and the cream-colored hospital packet inside a clear sleeve. That packet was no longer just paper. It had become the symbol of something bigger than the agreement itself. It was the record of the moment when they needed me enough to be honest. Naomi saw it in my hand and looked away too quickly. That told me she remembered. The first stage of the collapse came from a small disturbance. Naomi's attorney rose to frame the case as one of best interests, emotional confusion, and a birth relative struggling to remain in a healthy lane. He expected a soft win, maybe restricted, supervised contact, maybe a court lecture telling everyone to calm down, enough official language to make Naomi's private rewrite permanent. Then Judge Helen Barrow asked a question no one on Naomi's side had prepared for. "Counsel," she said, looking over the affidavit, "why is this petition written as if prior filed contact rights do not exist?" Silence changed shape in that room. Naomi's lawyer started speaking before he had the answer. "Your Honor, the parents believe," Judge Barrow cut in. "I did not ask what they believe. I asked why the petition omits material filed orders and attached hospital acknowledgments referenced by docket number. That was the first visible crack. Not emotional, Structural. Patricia stood and calmly handed up the indexed exhibits. The second stage came when the clerk connected the documents from the record system, and the whole arrangement became impossible to blur. Filed post-adoption contact agreement. Mediation requirement. Identity disclosure clause. Medical history access clause. Temporary hospital documents referencing transition, not erasure. District school entry flag lacking. Required support documentation. Mediation summary indicating no actual dangerous incident had been alleged. The judge read in silence for long enough that the paper itself became loud. Naomi tried once to interrupt and say, "I was trying to protect my son." Judge Barrow looked up and said, "From what specific documented conduct?" That question hung there like a bright wire. From what specific documented conduct? Not vibes. Not annoyance. Not jealousy Naomi wanted to pin on me because it was easier than admitting her own. Specific, documented, conduct. Her attorney pointed to the incident log. Patricia then walked through the log, line by line. The birthday driveway crying incident happened after Naomi had confirmed a visit and then canceled it when I was already outside with a gift bag in my passenger seat. There were time-stamped texts. The, quote, repeated boundary messages were 2 follow-up requests for makeup time after Naomi herself had asked me to keep a weekend open. The emotional intensity after therapy line had no witness, no description, and had been drawn from our mother seeing a counseling card in my bag weeks earlier. The school concern note had no attached event because there had been none. Then came Elena Ruiz. She testified simply, steadily, no theatrics, no speeches. She had never observed me behave inappropriately. Eli consistently identified me as a stable, loved person in his life. Naomi had spoken of phasing me out. The school system required documentation for a concern designation and had received none. When Naomi's attorney tried to suggest that teachers cannot know the full emotional context of complex families, Elena answered, "No, but we do know the difference between a child being unsafe and a child being asked to carry an adult's preferred story." I will never forget Naomi's face then, because for the first time she looked less offended than frightened. The third stage, the one that mattered most, was the self-collapse. It came because people like Naomi always think one more sentence will restore control if they can just say it in the right tone. Judge Barrow asked her directly, "Mrs. Bell, did you mark your sister as a release concern at school without any supporting event or documentation?" Naomi could have answered carefully. She could have said she was mistaken. She could have deferred to counsel. Instead, she did what controlling people do when their private logic is dragged into daylight. She told the truth in the ugliest way. "I had to create distance somehow," she said. "He was getting too attached." Everything after that moved very fast and very clearly. Judge Barrow asked, "Too attached to a person your own agreement required you to maintain contact with?" Naomi opened her mouth and then closed it. The judge continued, "So this was not a safety response. This was unilateral interference." Patricia did not smile. Good lawyers know when the record is already doing the work. Our mother made a sharp little sound from the bench behind them. Daniel stared down at his hands. Judge Barrow then asked the question that finished it. "Did you tell the school your sister may present emotionally because she posed a real risk, or because you believed that language would help limit contact without having to prove cause?" Naomi started crying then, not beautifully this time. Angrily. She said she was the mother. She said no one understood how hard it had been. She said I was always there. She said the bond had become unhealthy. She said she deserved peace in her own home. And in saying all that, she gave away the last shelter she had. Because none of it was danger. It was possession. The ruling was not theatrical. Real life rarely is. It was better than theatrical. It was precise. Judge Barrow denied Naomi's request for restricted contact. She found that Naomi had interfered with the filed agreement without sufficient cause, had misused school safety notation, and had attempted to create a record unsupported by documented conduct. She ordered immediate restoration of contact under an expanded and clearly scheduled plan, required a family systems therapist for identity disclosure support, prohibited unilateral negative labeling of me to schools or providers without documented cause, and directed correction of the district records. She also warned that continued interference could lead to sanctions and further court remedies. Then she looked straight at Naomi and said, "You cannot erase an inconvenient truth simply because your child has begun to notice it." That sentence settled over the whole room like final weather. After the hearing, there was a moment in the corridor I will remember for the rest of my life. The vending machine was still buzzing. Someone at the far end was arguing softly into a phone. The fluorescent lights made everybody look a little tired and too real. Naomi came out of the courtroom with Daniel at her shoulder and our mother behind them, still trying to arrange the disaster into something survivable for herself. She looked at me as if she expected one of two things, either a triumphant speech or a breakdown. I gave her neither. I held the cream-colored packet against my side and said, very quietly, "You wanted me erased. The record kept me anyway." Then I walked past her. That should have been enough. For many stories, it would have been the end. But endings that matter are not only about who loses. They are about what gets rebuilt after the losing is over. The first restored visit happened that Saturday at a supervised transition center because the court wanted the restart to be orderly and documented. The room had washable toys, low bookshelves, and a mural of trees that looked cheerful in a government-funded way. I hated that it had to happen there. I hated the clipboard at the desk. I hated the plastic chairs. I hated that a relationship built out of lullabies, fevers, train drawers, and moon pancakes had been pushed through so much institutional air to become visible again. Then Eli saw me. He froze for half a second, not because he did not know me, because children sometimes pause at the edge of relief to make sure it is real. Then he ran. He hit me hard enough that my knees shifted. His arms locked around my waist. He smelled like apple shampoo and outside wind. "You came back," he said into my sweater. No accusation, no theory, just the fact he had been living inside. I knelt and held him and had to close my eyes once because the room blurred. "I always come back," I said. That afternoon we built a crooked train track twice, read the same truck book 3 times, and cut banana slices onto peanut butter toast. He showed me a scrape on his shin. He asked if I still had the fish mobile. He wanted to know if thunder still counted in breaths. We did not discuss court or adults or the cowardly architecture of grown people. He was a child. And the point of all of it was that he got to stay one. The identity disclosure process took months. Court orders do not heal things on their own. They just stop certain kinds of damage from continuing unchecked. The therapist, a warm, careful woman named Dr. Leslie Huang, helped create language Eli could hold without being crushed by it. Naomi hated every minute of that process because it required truth without performance. Daniel attended more regularly after the hearing, perhaps because public embarrassment had finally succeeded where conscience had failed. Our mother sulked for weeks and then tried, twice, to float the idea that everyone had made mistakes. I did not take that bait. I stopped attending family dinners for a while. I did not explain. I simply declined. That was part of the recovery, too. People talk a great deal about winning, not nearly enough about refusing old arrangements after you do. At work, spring turned to summer. The trees outside the hospital parking deck filled in. I started sleeping better. The knot between my shoulder blades loosened. Dr. Monroe once said recovery can feel deceptively plain from the outside because the biggest signs are often domestic. Better appetite. Laundry folded before it becomes a chair. Fewer imaginary arguments in the shower. Music turned on again while making dinner. She was right. Recovery entered my life through small evidence. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I bought basil for the balcony and did not let it die. I washed the hospital smell out of the tote bag I had carried for years and replaced it with a new one, dark green canvas with sturdy handles. I moved the fireproof box from the hall closet to the top shelf in my bedroom because I no longer needed to reach for it in panic. Important distinction. Eli's visits became regular, protected, predictable. Every other Wednesday evening, alternate Saturdays, extended summer afternoons. It was not the shape I would have chosen if life had ever asked me to design one from innocence. But it was truthful, and truth has its own calm once it stops being contested every hour. One July Saturday, he helped me water the balcony pots. He wore a yellow t-shirt with a dinosaur missing one eye from too many washes. He took the little green watering can very seriously and got half the water on the concrete. "What happened when I was in your tummy?" he asked. Children choose their moments with no regard for adult readiness. They ask while dirt is under your fingernails, and sunlight is moving across a railing, and the kettle has just started to warm. So I told him this simple version we had all agreed on in therapy. "You grew inside me because your mommy needed help bringing you here," I said. "And from the day you were born, many people loved you. My job was to help you arrive. Your mommy's job is to raise you, and my job now is to love you truthfully." He considered that with the seriousness children sometimes bring to mysteries adults have ruined by overhandling. "Can more than one thing be true?" he asked. "Yes," I said. That may have been the wisest question in the whole story. By September, Naomi had changed in a way I did not trust, but could at least recognize. She was more careful. Not softer. Careful. Court correction had not made her noble. It had simply narrowed the territory in which she could lie without cost. Sometimes that is enough. Not every story ends with transformation. Sometimes it ends with enforced limits, documented consequences, and a person learning that her preferences no longer rule the room. Daniel became the practical bridge where Naomi could not. He started sending schedule confirmations on time. He copied the therapist when changes were needed. It was not redemption, it was administration. But administration can be a mercy when chaos has worn your nerves thin. Our mother remained the one relationship I did not rebuild. That might sound harsh to some people. It is not harsh. It is accurate. There are people who witness years of quiet theft and call peacekeeping a virtue because it costs them less than honesty would. I had been carrying the price of her comfort for most of my life. I was done. The deepest recovery scene came in a place so ordinary nobody else would have marked it. Eli's kindergarten class held a fall family reading morning in the school library. The room smelled like crayons, dust, and those plastic book covers schools still use on older hardbacks. Paper pumpkins were taped to the ends of shelves. Tiny chairs had been arranged in clumsy rows. Parents, grandparents, and one uncle in a landscaping uniform filled the room with the soft noise of coats, whispers, and coffee lids snapping shut. A year earlier, Naomi had tried to place me in that system as a concern. Now my name sat correctly on the approved guest list. No drama, no confrontation, just the record doing what records are supposed to do when people stop being allowed to rewrite them by hand. Elena Ruiz was there helping coordinate the children. She caught my eye once and gave the smallest nod. Eli brought me a picture book about the moon and sat tucked into my side on one of the little blue carpet squares while I read. Halfway through, he leaned his head against my arm in the completely unconscious way children do when safety has stopped being an argument. Across the room, Naomi was helping another group at a craft table. She looked up once. Our eyes met. There was no victory speech in me by then. That stage had passed. What I felt instead was something cleaner. Position. I was no longer asking to be acknowledged inside a lie. I was standing, properly named, inside the truth. After the reading hour, the children filed out in pairs. Eli took my hand with one of his, and Naomi's with the other, because life is often more complicated and more merciful than the people inside it. We walked down the hall under crooked artwork and fluorescent light, and for one strange second I thought about the first school note I had seen in that kitchen years before. Birth relative may present emotionally. They had been right about one thing, in a way they never intended. I had presented emotionally. I had carried love, grief, restraint, memory, discipline, terror, and hope through years of being useful enough to exploit and inconvenient enough to deny. What they had gotten wrong was the meaning. Emotion had not made me unfit. It had made me impossible to erase once I finally put structure around it. A month later, on an ordinary Wednesday evening, Eli helped me make pancakes at my condo for the first time in a long while. He still liked them cut into moons. The fish mobile had been taken down because he was bigger now, but I kept it folded in the closet with tissue paper around the wooden arms. Rain tapped the glass door. The radio played low. Butter hissed in the pan. "Can I crack the egg?" he asked. "You can try," I said. Shell went everywhere, of course. We laughed. He wore one of my old apron ties twice around his waist. There was flour on the counter, on the floor, on his sleeve, and somehow on the handle of the refrigerator. That was the recovery. Not a grand declaration, not a montage. Just a kitchen warm with ordinary life, a child no longer taught to fear the truth of where he came from, and a woman who had finally stopped mistaking silence for surrender. Later, after dinner, he fell asleep on the couch with his cheek against the cushion and one hand open the way it had been when he was a baby. I covered him with the soft gray blanket from the armchair and stood there for a minute in the lamplight, listening to the rain in the refrigerator and his steady breathing. In the bedroom closet, on the top shelf, the fireproof box still held the cream-colored packet with the red clip. I did not need to touch it. That was how I knew I had my life back.
Thank you for watching. If you'd like to hear more, you can follow this channel. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon to be notified when a new video is uploaded.